There are moments in history that feel too big, too tragic, to simply be called accidents. Events where everything that could go wrong does, and when people look back, they begin to ask questions, not just about what happened, but about what might have been hidden. This is one of those stories. The story of the Titanic, a ship that was called unsinkable, a journey that was meant to be historic, and a disaster that will become one of the most talked about mysteries in the world. In April of 1912, the RMS Titanic set sail on its very first voyage. It was the largest and most luxurious ship ever built at the time, a symbol of human achievement, of engineering, of confidence. People believed this ship was different, safer, stronger, practically impossible to sink, and that belief would become part of the tragedy. On board were over 2,000 people, passengers from different parts of the world. Some were wealthy, traveling in luxury. Others were immigrants, hoping to start a new life in America. All of them shared one thing. They trusted the ship. They trusted that they would arrive safely. For the first few days, everything went as planned. The ocean was calm. The journey was smooth. There was no sign of danger. But beneath that calm, warnings had already begun. Ice warnings. Messages sent from other ships, reporting large icebergs drifting in the North Atlantic. These warnings reached the Titanic, but they weren't treated as urgent. The ship continued forward at high speed, as if nothing could stop it. And then, on the night of April 14th, everything changed. It was cold. The ocean was still, almost too still. There were no waves, which made it harder to spot ice in the dark. The lookout stood watching, scanning the horizon, and then he saw it, an iceberg, directly ahead. There was no time to react properly. The crew attempted to turn the ship, to avoid a direct collision, but it was too late. The iceberg scraped along the side of the ship, tearing open sections of the hull below the waterline. At first, it didn't seem catastrophic. There was no massive explosion, no dramatic crash, just a long, grinding impact. But the damage had already been done. Water began to enter the ship, slowly at first, then faster. Compartment after compartment started to fill, and that's when the truth became clear. The ship that was believed to be unsinkable was going to sink. What followed was confusion, disbelief. People didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. Many passengers stayed calm. Some even continued their normal activities because they couldn't believe the ship was in real danger. But the crew knew, and they began preparing lifeboats. And that's when another problem became clear. There weren't enough lifeboats for everyone, not even close. The ship carried far fewer lifeboats than needed because it was believed they wouldn't be necessary. As the ship continued to take on water, panic slowly began to spread. Orders were given, women and children first. Lifeboats were lowered into the freezing ocean, some half empty, because people still didn't fully understand what was happening. Time passed, and the situation became worse. The front of the ship began to sink lower. The angle increased, and the reality became impossible to ignore. This was not a drill. This was not temporary. The Titanic was going down. The lights flickered. The sound of the ship changed. Metal bending, water rushing, people shouting. And in the middle of it all, the cold, the freezing air, and the even colder water below. As the final moments approached, the ship broke apart, and within hours, it disappeared beneath the surface, taking more than 1,500 lives with it. It was one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. But for many, the story didn't end there, because after the tragedy, questions began to emerge. Questions about decisions that were made, warnings that were ignored, and details that didn't seem to add up. Why was the ship traveling so fast in a known ice zone? Why were there so few lifeboats? Why weren't the iceberg warnings taken more seriously? And then, more controversial ideas began to appear. Theories, speculation. One of the most well-known was the idea that the Titanic wasn't actually the Titanic, but its sister ship, the Olympic. According to this theory, the Olympic had been damaged before, and instead of taking the loss, it was secretly switched with the Titanic, sent out on a voyage with the intention of claiming insurance. A planned disaster, a ship meant to sink. Supporters of this theory point to similarities between the two ships, and certain details they believe don't match official records. But historians and experts have strongly rejected this idea. There is no solid evidence to support it, no proof of a switch, no confirmation of a deliberate plan. Still, the theory continues to exist because of one simple reason. The Titanic story feels bigger than just an accident. It feels like something that should have been prevented. And when something that big happens, people look for deeper meaning, deeper explanations. But the truth may be simpler and, in some ways, more unsettling, because sometimes disasters don't happen because of one single mistake. They happen because of many small ones, ignored warnings, overconfidence, assumptions that everything will be fine, until suddenly it isn't. The Titanic was not destroyed by one event, but by a series of decisions, choices that at the time seemed reasonable, but together led to disaster. Today, the wreck of the Titanic still rests at the bottom of the ocean, silent, cold, a reminder of what happened, and a symbol of how quickly things can change. It has been explored, studied, documented, and yet the fascination remains, because the Titanic is more than just a ship. It's a story of ambition, of confidence, of tragedy, and of questions that still linger. Was everything done that could have been done? Could it have been avoided? And why do some details still feel unfinished? More than 100 years later, people still return to this story, still searching for answers, still wondering if what we know is the full truth or just part of it. Because sometimes history tells us what happened, but not always why. And that's what keeps the mystery alive, even today.